There is a version of gratitude you have been sold that is not gratitude at all. It is positive thinking dressed in better clothes. Count your blessings. Focus on the good. Think about what you have. These instructions are not wrong exactly, but they are shallow, and the ancient traditions knew something far deeper. The gratitude of the ancient traditions was not a mood management technique. It was not a cognitive reframe designed to make you feel better about your circumstances. It was a metaphysical position, a way of standing in relation to existence itself. And the difference between those two things is everything. Cicero called gratitude not merely a virtue, but the mother of all virtues. His argument was precise. A person who cannot recognize what they have received cannot recognize the nature of value at all. The ungrateful person is not just impolite. They have a defective relationship to reality itself they take without seeing the gift in the taking. Cicero wrote in his Tusculan Disputations, named after the very villa where he composed them, that ingratitude was a vice beyond all others. He was writing not in comfort, but in grief. His daughter Tullia had just died, and he was in voluntary exile from the political chaos consuming Rome. The gratitude he described had been tested against real loss. When the Stoics practiced gratitude, they were not pretending life was easy. Marcus Aurelius wrote his thanks for simple things: a clear morning, a useful conversation, the use of his limbs while managing an empire at war and burying children. That is not positive thinking. That is something else entirely. The meditations were never meant to be published. They are private notes written in Greek, not Latin, his administrative language, in a tent on the northern edge of the empire, while plague swept through his legions. What we read is a man actually working on himself, not performing wisdom for an audience. The gratitude recorded there was real. The Benedictine tradition, ora et labora, prayer and work, built gratitude into the architecture of the day. Every hour was marked by a return to awareness, not because the monks had nothing difficult in their lives, but because they had understood that the natural state of the unexamined mind is to move past gifts without receiving them, to consume without recognizing the source. Benedict's rule assigned the monks 7 hours of prayer each day, not because prayer was decorative, but because he had observed what happened to minds left unstructured. They drifted toward complaint, comparison, and the forgetting of gifts received. The bell that called them back was not interrupting life. It was constituting it. Here are 6 of the deepest teachings on gratitude from philosophy and the wisdom traditions. Not instructions for feeling better, insights into what gratitude actually is when it is taken seriously. Teaching 1. Real gratitude is not a response to good things. It is a way of perceiving all things. The Stoics observed that 2 people can experience the same event and register it entirely differently, not because their circumstances differ, but because their orientation to those circumstances differs. Gratitude, in the fullest sense, is not an emotion that arises when good things happen. It is a trained capacity to perceive value that is always already present. Seneca described this with particular force in his letters to Lucilius. From his country villa at Nomentum, 14 miles outside Rome, he wrote that the philosopher's task was not to arrange circumstances favorably, but to arrange the eye that sees them. The garden at Nomentum looked ordinary to the indifferent visitor. To Seneca, it was inexhaustible. The philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. She was describing the capacity to see what is actually there, not filtered through habit, through expectation, through the lens of what you have decided reality should contain. Genuine gratitude requires exactly this, the willingness to actually look at what is in front of you rather than at the story you have been telling about it. The Buddhist alms bowl practice was not merely a means of obtaining food. It was a daily training in receiving, in meeting each gift from the generous householder or the poor one with the same full attention. The monk who received a spoonful of rice with genuine gratitude had more than the senator who received a banquet without seeing it. The heated baths at Cicero's Tusculum villa, the balnea he mentions in his letters as a great luxury, were themselves the occasion for a philosophical meditation. He describes the warmth of the water as the kind of gift most Romans accepted without acknowledgement, the ordinary abundance that educated ingratitude by becoming invisible through familiarity. Cicero made it a practice to notice what he had before he lost it, teaching too. Gratitude requires mortality awareness to be real. The Stoics prescribed a practice they called negative visualization. Imagine losing what you have. Imagine your friend is gone. Imagine this meal is the last one. Imagine this morning light does not come tomorrow. Not to frighten yourself, to restore the value of what the habitual eye has stopped seeing. Marcus Aurelius lost 5 of his 13 children in infancy. He watched the Antonine Plague kill 1/3 of the population of Rome. He wrote about gratitude for a clear morning, knowing that the morning might be the last one. His negative visualization was not theoretical. It was written on the back of actual loss. That is what makes the gratitude in the meditations legible as something real. This is not morbid. It is profoundly practical. The thing you take for granted is the thing you have stopped seeing. Negative visualization is simply the act of untaking it for granted, of seeing it again for the first time. And what was invisible, the warmth, the presence, the ordinary abundance becomes, suddenly, immense. Seneca wrote in his letters, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare. Drink some simple water, eat some simple bread, and ask yourself, is this the condition I feared?" The practice was designed not to produce suffering, but to reveal what he already had and had stopped seeing. Teaching 3. Gratitude is the antidote to the hedonic treadmill. Epicurus observed something that modern psychology has confirmed with data. After we acquire something we wanted, we adapt to it rapidly. The new house becomes just a house. The new relationship becomes ordinary. The achievement becomes the new baseline. The pleasure diminishes even as we acquire more. This is the hedonic treadmill, always moving, never arriving. Seneca wrote to Lucilius with particular precision about this trap. The man who is always searching for more has condemned himself to perpetual poverty, no matter what he accumulates. At Nomentum, surrounded by a simple garden rather than a senator's estate, he claimed to possess more than the richest man in Rome because he had learned to see what he had. Modern psychological research by Robert Emmons and Michael McCullough confirmed what Epicurus observed. People who kept weekly gratitude journals reported higher levels of well-being, more positive affect, and fewer physical complaints than those who did not. The ancient practice turned out to be physiologically and psychologically measurable. The traditions had discovered something structural about the human mind's relationship to perception and value. The Benedictine practice of eating in silence while a reader read aloud from scripture was not an accident of asceticism. It was engineering. The monks could not distract themselves from the taste of the food with conversation. Silence forced attention. And attention transformed the simplest meal, bread, water, a cup of wine, into something the habitual mind would have consumed without tasting. Teaching 4. Gratitude is relational. It requires that you recognize you did not arrive here alone. The Buddhist tradition of metta loving-kindness practice begins with gratitude for those who contributed to your existence and development. Parents, teachers, strangers, whose small acts shaped your capacity for what you now do. The practice systematically expands the circle of acknowledged contribution until you realize how many threads run into the fabric of a single human life. This is not sentimentality. It is accuracy. You did not learn language alone. You did not develop your values alone. The ground you stand on, literally and figuratively, was laid by others. Genuine gratitude is the recognition of that truth, and the recognition changes how you move through the world. Cicero's own gratitude had a specific target: Greece. He acknowledged in multiple letters and speeches that everything he knew, his philosophy, his rhetoric, his political thought, came from Greek teachers and Greek books. For a Roman senator, this admission was almost scandalous. But Cicero insisted, ingratitude toward the tradition that formed you is a kind of lying about what you are. Marcus Aurelius began his meditations with 2 books of gratitude listing by name. Every person who had taught him anything of value: his grandfather, his father, his adoptive father Antoninus, his teachers Rusticus and Apollonius. The Emperor of Rome began his private philosophical journal not with his own thoughts, but with acknowledgement of all that he had received. That is the relational posture. The monks of Monte Cassino were, in a precise sense, the custodians of civilization during the collapse of the Roman world. They copied manuscripts that would otherwise have been lost. Every monk who bent over a scriptorium desk in the 6th century was receiving a gift, the thought of Virgil, Cicero, Augustine, and passing it forward. Their gratitude was expressed in the care of the copying. Every letter written cleanly was a thank you. Teaching 5. Ingratitude is not neutral. It is actively corrosive. Seneca wrote about this with unusual severity. Ingratitude, he argued, is not simply a failure to notice good things. It is a spiritual corrosive that damages the person who practices it. The mind that is habituated to seeing only what is absent, lacking, or insufficient develops a lens that it eventually cannot see without. That lens colors everything. The ungrateful person is not being realistic. They are being selectively attentive in a way that guarantees a certain kind of chronic dissatisfaction. And dissatisfaction, maintained long enough, becomes character, becomes the person. Gratitude, in this sense, is not just a pleasant practice. It is self-preservation. Marcus Aurelius had particular reason to practice this. As emperor, he was surrounded by flatterers, petitioners, and those who wanted things from him. The gratitude he practiced was partly a defense against the imperial illusion, the belief that because everyone serves you, you are owed everything. His private notes remind him repeatedly of how much he owes to others. The powerful person has the most reason to resist ingratitude and the most pressure toward it. Seneca observed that ingratitude was Rome's epidemic. Not its political violence or its wars, but its forgetting of gift. In his essay on benefits, the longest work he wrote, he described a civilization that had learned to receive everything: roads, laws, grain shipments, cultural inheritance, while acknowledging nothing. The scale of forgetting was proportional to the scale of what had been given. Teaching 6. The deepest gratitude is not for what you have, it is for the fact that you are. This is the teaching of the mystical traditions, the Sufi poets, the Vedantic philosophers, the Christian contemplatives. Beneath gratitude for things, beneath gratitude for circumstances or relationships or gifts, there is a prior gratitude that all these traditions point toward. The gratitude of existence for itself. The philosopher Leibniz asked the most fundamental question in metaphysics: why is there something rather than nothing? For the traditions of mystical gratitude, this question is not abstract. It is the direct encounter with the sheer improbability of existence. That the universe exists at all, that life emerged within it, that consciousness arose capable of contemplating its own existence, this chain of improbabilities is the gift beneath all other gifts. Seneca approached this in his final letters. Facing forced suicide under Nero's order, he wrote to Lucilius, not with bitterness, but with something closer to astonishment. He had been given the use of life, the use of thought, of friendship, of the sky at morning. These were gifts he had not earned and could not keep forever. The gratitude of the person facing death is the gratitude stripped of every shallowness, that you exist, that you can experience beauty and pain, and thought and love and morning light, that you have the capacity for any of this at all, not as comfort, as wonder. The ancient traditions called this the first and most fundamental form of prayer, the astonishment of being rather than not being. The Buddhist tradition in the Jetavana Grove spoke of this as the preciousness of human birth, the probability of being born human in circumstances where the Dharma is available, with the capacity to practice this, was described as rarer than a sea turtle surfacing through a floating ring. Not sentimentality, but mathematics. The gift is improbable to a degree that should produce constant wonder. Cicero, in the Somnium Scipionis, the dream of Scipio that closes his Republic, described a vision of the universe from above, the earth tiny, Rome invisible, the human span of years minuscule against the scale of time. His conclusion was not despair, but wonder. The smallness of human life against the cosmos made the fact of consciousness more miraculous, not less. The gratitude was proportional to the improbability. The practice of gratitude in the Benedictine tradition culminated in Lauds the morning prayer that greeted each new day as a gift not owed. The monks who had slept in their stone cells and risen before light to sing the dawn office were performing the metaphysical position directly. Existence is not owed. The day is not guaranteed. What is here now is gift, and its right reception is praise. Marcus Aurelius wrote in the Meditations, "When you wake in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own." The capacity for gratitude and the capacity for equanimity were, for him, the same capacity. Both required seeing what was actually there. Seneca's final instruction to Lucilius was not complex. He said, "Philosophy promises above all common sense, humanity, and fellowship. Withdraw from being ungrateful, from being grasping, from being restless. Do not reach for what is missing. Turn toward what is here." The entire philosophical project, he wrote in one of his last letters, could be summarized as learning to see what you already have. Not more, just, finally, that. The practice available to you is not complicated. It does not require belief in any particular tradition. It requires only that you stop occasionally and look at what is actually here, not in comparison to what is missing, not in measurement against what it should be. Simply here, what is already real, already present, already, in the truest sense, enough. This is the posture of the grateful person, not someone who has more, but someone who sees more. The traditions agree on this. The grateful person and the person who suffers chronic lack can stand in the same place, before the same morning, and what they receive will be different, not because their circumstances differ, but because one is actually looking and one is not. 6 teachings on gratitude. It is a way of perceiving, not a response to conditions. It deepens in proportion to mortality awareness. It breaks the hedonic treadmill that no amount of acquisition can break. It is relational, recognizing the gift in the giving. Ingratitude corrodes the perceiver, and beneath all particular gratitude, there is the prior gratitude for existence itself. These are not 6 separate teachings. They are 6 angles on the same practice, the practice of actually receiving what is already here. If this reached you at the right time, subscribe. We explore the deepest questions of human existence every week so you can live yours more fully.